Okay, so let's move on to Gillian Welch and her album Revival. In the opening montage, you heard Annabelle, and now you're going to hear Tear My Still House Down.
Tear my still house down. Let it go to rust. Don't leave no trace of the hiding place where Mayfair stood.
Okay, Matt, what are the stats on Gillian?
Yeah, so Revival by Gillian Welch comes in at number 615 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 74 in 1996, number 3,630 of all time. It's Gillian Welch's third highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind 2011's The Harrow and the Harvest and 2001's Time, The Revelator. Revival did not make Rolling Stone's list. Actually, none of the albums made Rolling Stone's list tonight. And Gillian Welch ranked number 690 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
Okay, this album came out April 9th, 1996. I didn't know anything about this artist, so I was surprised to learn that she was born in 1967 in New York City, but then grew up in LA in Southern California, and then moved to Nashville only after college when she tried to...
There is nothing
doesn't sound
about
like
this
it,
album
does it?
that would make you think, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I was very surprised about that. Just goes to prove music can resonate with anyone. This is her first album. She has 7 studio albums total, although she has done a lot of kind of playing with other artists, and that's kind of collaborating and things like that as well. So she appears on many other things. And her music partner, David Rawlings, who appears on this album, she also appears on his albums as kind of a collaborator. So even though the brand is his, she's also prominent on them. Genres are country, bluegrass, folk, and Americana. She met David Rawlings in Boston because she moved there after California to the Berklee College of Music, and went there for music.
Wild origin.
Yeah.
It all tracks. It all sounds right out. Yeah.
Her influences are Neil Young, Bob Dylan, the Stanley Brothers, who are like kind of a classic bluegrass band, Emmylou Harris and the Carter Family, similar artists. There's a lot that I didn't recognize when I looked at all music, but Ryan Adams, Drive-By Truckers, Calexico are some. Even like Jenny Lewis to an extent, I think. Neko Case also has some vibe of her, and just kind of like, she does strike me as Americana kind of as a whole. So her 2011 album Harrow and the Harvest reached 20 on the Billboard 200, and she has no songs that ever on the Hot 100. Some fun facts: T-Bone Burnett produced this album, so he's been popping up all over the place on. At this point, he wanted to capture the bare sound of her live performance for this album. She was nominated for Best Contemporary Folk Album, but lost to Springsteen's Ghost of Tom Joad. She has sung 2...
That's fitting.
Yeah. She sung 2 songs and was an associate producer on the Oh Brother, Where Art Thou album soundtrack that became a huge sensation. She also made a cameo in the film as somebody buying an album. And the song Acne Bell, which is the second to last song, also known... Those are flowers or plants also known as Oakany bells, and she later started her own label with that name. And she has a strong country influence, but she's also, influenced by rock and roll, and has covered many artists' songs that are rock and roll artists. So, and I was wondering, Matt, if she covered Radiohead's Black Star in 2005, which apparently was pretty popular. I hadn't heard it before, so I thought that was interesting. And she starts her U.S. tour this month, so she is coming all over the place. She's actually coming to Boise in June, so I'm kind of curious as to seeing her. So Gillian Welch, I kind of don't know if I knew her, but I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on this album and Americana as well. So let's start with John on this.
Okay. This is one of those names of an artist that has always sort of been in the world for me, but I haven't sat down to explore, right? And I will lay my biases on the table. It isn't so much that I don't like Americana. It's just not a music that when I have time to listen to music, I'm like, let me put on an Americana album. And that's one of the reasons I really like doing this podcast so much, is it takes me into directions and focuses me on sort of it's a survey of the best albums of certain genres. And this was, and often when I hear about Gillian Welch, who, full disclosure, Matt, since you were so honest earlier, I will say I never processed as Gillian Welch. I always thought it was Gillian Welch when I would see it. So now I know, and am learned. But I would often see, and we're going to cover it, but on best of lists of the 2000s, Time the Revelator would come. And so I've listened to that a little bit just to kind of get a feel. And this was such an interesting listen for me this week, because the first time I listened to this album, I didn't super connect with it. I just kind of cold listened to it. And at first, I won't say it blended together, but the instrumentation, I didn't see the nuance of it like I would see later. It kind of just, and I think it's because we don't listen to Americana, and there are instruments in Americana that are so distinct to me that the second I hear them, I'm like, oh, it's this type of song. Not in a bad way, but it's just, it marks it as very specific, and it also is consistently a part of it, right? And so I kind of almost have to like orient my brain to hear it. And then the second time I listened to it, it would probably fall in my top 5 or 10 albums we've covered in the whole time we've done this, where my take went from not connecting the first pretty profoundly to like really enjoying the album. And I started to see things like, for example, like, oh, One More Dollar is pretty much a Neil Young song, like when I listened to it, and quickly processed that. Pass You By kind of rocks a little bit in its own way. Rock maybe is the wrong word, but like has a little bit more edge to it, and I was feeling it. And the beginning 2-part Orphan Girl and Annabelle, whereas at first they seemed like a 2-part set to me, they separated along the way, and it's just also the spare production. This sounds like it was at times like recorded in a small room and then pass through a phonograph, like is how it sounds sonically to me at times. That's not a bad thing, by the way. I kind of, in this era where we're getting more and more clean and that clean production where all of the instruments are sort of jammed together at the same decibel level, or it's clean and one instrument is so blasted in the front. I don't necessarily like hate it all the time, but because that's becoming more and more, and we're not even there yet. God, by the time we get to the 2010s, it's going to be wild to listen to albums because everything's going to be produced the same. But this one was a nice sort of change in that it was both spare in production, and also it had the same effect kind of that like a distorted production would have, but it isn't distorted. It's more just I guess it's its own way of doing lo-fi, right? Production-wise, it makes it sound old is another way to put it. Yes, I think by design, like it's sort of timeless. So the production makes it feel like literally the embodiment of something of a genre called Americana, right? Of another time, and the cover of this album seems of another time, and it's plopped in 1996. I could see why I wasn't familiar with Gillian Welch in 1996 or throughout my teenage years and early 20s, because it doesn't in any way orient with the times, right? And I didn't have a connection to, although with her, knowing she's from New York and LA and Boston, I was gonna say I didn't have really like a connection with those areas that I think of as playing this music, like Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, like right. Those type, Arkansas. So that's why it's kind of wild. I would have guessed she was from like Arkansas or Kentucky or somewhere with the sound of this album, but she really channels it along the way. And the second time I listened to this album, it had moved from don't know if I'd recommend to like I really like this album. And so it's the definition of a grower. I think for me, some of the standout tracks were Pass You By, One More Dollar, and Akeney Bell were the 3 that I really liked. But the second and third time I listened, because it was the rare album in the 90s that was an appropriate length for what they were trying to do. In this case, 10 songs and 41 minutes, which is exactly how long an Americana album should be for me. It was the sweet spot. So it didn't wear on me at all. I think if it had gone up to like an hour, it might not have had the same lasting effect for me. But it passed the test of also making me excited about listening to that Time the Revelator album again and seeing where the narrative goes. Because is this her first or second album, Josh?
First album.
First album, yeah. I thought so, and so if this is a debut, you could see a lot of the pieces here. I got the vibe of like somebody like Angel Olsen and somebody of another era, and I guess it's cousins. The closest thing we've covered to this of a female singer-songwriter recently, at least, would be probably like Iris DeMint, right? Like it's kind of like a cousin of this sound, but
Yeah.
not exactly like it. That's a little bit more mountain Christian music, I'd say, where this is more like a different brand, but they're cousins. There's also a little bit of like evolutionary Loretta Lynn to what this sounds like. It does sound like if you said, let's take Loretta Lynn and fast forward her 25 years later or 20 years later, you probably would get to Gillian Welch. So I like that because I really like that Loretta Lynn album that we covered way back when nowadays. So I think this one moved in the thumbs up category for me, guys.
Nice.
Yeah, I've known of Gillian Welch. I think I've even seen her a couple times here and there, like at probably maybe at Bonnaroo or something like that.
It said that she played Bonnaroo.
Yeah,
times, so
and I know like my uncle, my brother. I know that they're very much into like Americana music as well, and I've heard songs being played by them here and there. And so there's familiarity, but I didn't know any. I don't recall ever listening to a Gillian Welch album. I probably knew her more actually because she was certainly, as you said, Josh, in the "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" soundtrack, which really was like that was a big deal, right? That album brought America this type of music. John, you're talking about this. I don't associate this with 1996, but there was only a couple years away from when there was a album that that really kind of put this kind of stuff on the map that was, more popular. Yep. And T-Bone Burnett.
I feel
was
like
behind
5
that.
years later. Yep, 5 years later, you heard this sound. But when
Right.
I was, 1996, this was so
Correct.
far from the realm of popular music.
Yes. Yep. No, for sure. So, so this is a genre that over the years, and I'll talk a little bit more about this when we cover Wilco, but it was a grower genre for me because when I first started hearing it, I was like, it's country music. I had an averse reaction to country music because I wasn't a huge fan of the Nashville country that I had heard, growing up. The twang, the vibes there was not my thing. And then over the years, it gradually kind of, got more into at least this version of a country, the Americana kind of vibe. So I very much responded to this album almost immediately, and it's kind of in some ways because it's a pretty different turn from where we've been, from the lanes that the genres and types of styles that we have been covering. So it's a little bit of that palate cleanser, in particular because this is kind of one of those albums that like. And I was going to say, John, you're along the lines that you were talking about. It's like going through a time warp, right? So this is like early. We always talk about, it's kind of like reminiscent of some songs or artists from like the 60s or whatever. Well, this is going back to like the Dust Bowl, like Depression era, kind of thing. Folk music, the very beginnings of recorded music, which is just singer-songwriter, acoustic guitar. Certainly it's produced more. It's not like this really primitive production style, but it's very simplistic, right? And it's a very simple, stripped down type of music, which occasionally does, yes, with like a song like Pass You By, they're going to plug in some guitars and have more of a blues rock song, right? But for the most part, it's just singer-songwriter stuff. It's acoustic guitar playing. I got to give props to David Rawlings here. He's not only her partner in music, but also their romantic partners. I don't think they ever got married, but they've been romantically involved for a while. And I love them together. I think David Rawlings is an excellent guitar player, and it's a very subtle type of guitar playing, but it's very beautiful. It's very it can be very intricate at times, and he does great harmonies with Gillian Welch. So their harmonies are lathered all over the place here. I wasn't sure if he was with her this early on, but I'm glad to see that he was because it's very much a staple of their sound from the music that I've heard of them. It's just, when I hear Gillian Welch, it's hard to think of her without David Rawlings. They're pretty much, it's a Gillian Welch album, but David Rawlings, I think, and he co-wrote 7 of the 10 songs here that I'm seeing. Yeah. So he's certainly a partner here with Gillian Welch. But I just love the vibes of this type of music. Really stripped down folk Americana music can become boring at times for me. and uninteresting, but I never really feel that way when I hear Gillian Welch. I love her voice. I love the style behind it. And I do like the fact that, for the most part, while it is a little bit kind of in the same lane musically, but there are, let's do a song like "Pass You By." Let's do a song like "Paper Wings," which I don't know, this whatever the production style that they're using on the guitar, it sounded a little bit like a little bit of something that came from like a Quentin Tarantino movie. There's some kind of cool vibes to that, but just really pretty music, really kind of pensive. Kind of nice, just music just to kind of have, whether it's in the background or you just something you want to relax to. I could listen to this type of music in the morning, in the evening, during the day. It's not really any time serves it best. It's just whenever I feel like kind of, mellowing out to this kind of vibe. But she's great. I'm looking forward. Time the Revelator. I know that song. It's an excellent song. It's really freaking good. And I think that's her highest rated album. So on Best Ever Album. So I'm excited to cover that. But yeah, really good stuff here. She's a great artist. It's one of those, every time when I've either the couple times seeing her or hearing her, it's just, to me, it's like, this is an artist that I think more people should be aware of. But I also think that she's quite fine in her relative anonymity. She doesn't seem like, she's like an artist, I think, that would just prefer to do her music and tour her small little venues and, get good reviews and move on from there. So yeah, really, really high for me. I like this from the get-go. Thumbs up.
Yeah, I really responded to this as well. There's something about this type of music, and especially when she did it, I don't know, it was just like this hidden frequency that I really kind of like immediately dialed into. When she sings, she has a really great voice. She has, like you guys were saying, like this classic feel to it, like she is from another, she kind of embodies this era that she's interested in, even though she's not from that era. And she does this type of music really well. I think there's a variety on this album too. There's kind of like, you can't just kind of say it's all blanket folk, because there's some like,
right.
There's some blues, there's some kind of like gospel, like religious songs that we didn't mention, like By the Mark is clearly, about Jesus and in the lyrics and content. So it's kind of got that crossover that kind of all Americana has, I guess, that in themes, right? And different things. I like the kind of, and it's also varied in kind of like slower, simpler songs and kind of more up-tempo stuff too. So I appreciate that as well. I mean, I really found myself kind of even like singing along, like the way that the songs are constructed and the way she sings them kind of is inviting in a way to like sing along with her, which is so like kind of strange and like transfixing. So like Orphan Girl, I just kind of ended up finding myself singing along, even though I was like kind of half paying attention on one listen. And so that's kind of how I felt about the whole album, even throughout the entire thing. I really like Barroom Girls. That's the 4th track. We didn't talk about that. All of the songs have this kind of quality to them that is inviting. And Matt, you said that they're simple. They are simple, but there's also that doesn't mean that they're not there's not a weight to them, and there's not like
right.
I don't know, a depth is to them that I really appreciate. Tear My Stillhouse Down is kind of like the more bluesy kind. That's kind of why I chose it for a song. It's kind of, I don't know, it's got some good piano in it, and it's more kind of like stomp your feet type of Americana. And so yeah, the 41 minutes is definitely like welcome, and I feel like this album really gives you a glimpse into who she is as an artist and kind of her talent and her ability to kind of span and transcend like different genres in Americana and folk. And the instrumentation is really great. You're right, Matt, like David Rawlings complements her really well. He's kind of like, I was so focused on her a lot, but he is, you're right, like the harmonies, he is, I do recall like hearing him as well. He's an important part of this album. And it just, it even though like John said, it does have like an old timey intentional production to it, that didn't bother me at all. It still felt like of a piece with this. So yeah, this was a big surprise for me. And I really liked it. So thumbs up.
Yeah, and simple in the sense that, because we've been listening to a lot of stuff. There's been some pretty adventurous and ambitious, I guess, albums with a lot of production. And let's try this and let's throw that at it. Let's do this kind of thing in the studio or with this synthesizer or whatever. This complex, time signature or whatever. And this is just like, nope, we're just old music classic, classic folk type, old school Americana, and that's Americana music, right? So, but you're right. I think that there is kind of like, there is a depth to this, this type of thing. So, and
it's even different, not to talk about our next band, but it's different than the Wilco album, too, in a way, in a lot of ways, I would say. But, and that's also Americana, in the broader sense. So,
it is and it isn't, Josh. It's yeah. So let's, John, you good? We ready to move on over there?
I am ready.
All right.